What's up, guys? Mike the Cop. In my hands is an opioid overdose kit, aka Narcan. Sometimes Narcan, sometimes Narcan't, sometimes Nar don't think it's the best idea.
I got you. Yeah, I will defend my brothers. I will defend the weak. I will pursue and fight evil so others may sleep. I am the sheepdog, protecting the night. Wolf hunters unite. Bring it on. It's time to fight.
Sadly, incidents like the one I'm about to show you are scenes very similar to what I have seen way too many times in my career.
Police in Massachusetts looking to file child endangerment charges. Look at this. Against a mother who apparently overdosed on heroin in a store with her toddler next to her.
These things are terrible to see, not only for the person who has, through their decisions, at some point led them down this path of addiction, at which now the narcotic has a hold of them rather than them making the choice at this point anymore, and their kids and those that love them around them suffer as a result. But our police officers, law enforcement officers, the ones that should be receiving all the training and doing the administration of Narcan, should that become a regular facet of what it is that they do? I don't personally think so, and I'm going to explain why. Let me say at the outset that this is not about saving lives. We can't create a false dichotomy, which logically means you can't make me choose, like you either want to save lives or you don't want to carry Narcan. Those aren't the only choices. There are a plethora of other opportunities and options and things to think through about how to attack the so-called opioid epidemic besides just those options. What I'm asserting is every life is valuable, but you can't hold up the value of life without also holding up the value of individual responsibility. Now, in my home state of Michigan, they have basically taken away the latter while only holding out the former. They've done that through a couple of statutes. MCL 333-7403, Section 3A, and 333.7404, Section 3A, basically gives them a granted immunity, those who are using narcotics, a granted immunity from prosecution from drug use or possession if the user or companion calls for or seeks out medical treatment. Now, as you would suspect, this becomes highly abused, and there is no more recourse for the law enforcement officer. You show up, you administer the Narcan, they wake up, they go on their way. Yes, if they have narcotics on them, you can confiscate that. They might not get that back, but there is no accountability for the individual. That's how things are going. That's the trajectory in my home state. I don't know how many other states are like that, how many other jurisdictions are practically like that. But what I'm going to assert is that we need both the value of life and the value of individual accountability, because you really truly can't have one without the other. Now, back to the question at hand. The real question isn't whether or not saving lives is a noble endeavor. I believe at the very core of who I am that it is. However, the question really is, are law enforcement officers the best solution for helping to tackle this through the use of Narcan simply because it's a convenience? Is it the best use of resources? Is it the best approach to this issue?
That
Is it the best use of resources? Is it the best approach to the problem? I don't think so. Number one, because this will not get to the root of the problem. You don't put a Band-Aid on a compound fracture. You don't deal with cancer by prescribing aspirin. There is a serious problem at the root of all this that goes to human psyche and the issue of addiction, and there's a lot going on there that this video will not and cannot be about. But the point being is that having officers carry around Narcan and helping bring addicts back when they overdose while not really having much enforcement authority over this is a bad idea, because it's not attacking the root of the issue. There's a lot more that officers can be involved in their community besides just Narcan. And again, this isn't necessarily about whether or not it's good or bad that someone has been brought back. I think it is. Anytime a mother, a brother, a child can see their loved one have another chance at redemption, This isn't a bad thing, but again, is it the best approach? Number 2, increased liability and stress on the officer and departments that are already stretched thin with time and resources. We simply don't have an infinite amount of time and resources to deal with the problems that are facing law enforcement as it is. What is it, I would ask, that you want your officers to be absolutely best at their skill set, in responding to crimes and law enforcement in your community? If we continue, and we already have this, if we continue to have an ever-expanding, endless list of responsibilities that law enforcement officers have, are we going to ever really get the best out of what we're hoping for with law enforcement, or are we going to continue to get mediocre results because we're stretched so thin? And the liability issue is real. If I administer or fail to administer Narcan in any given situation, I guarantee you in this climate, I am going to be the subject of a lawsuit directly or indirectly as named as part of my department. So this is a real issue and a real stress on those that are serving as law enforcement officers that are being required to learn and know how and when to administer medicine. Which brings me to number 3. We are law enforcement officers, not medical personnel. Again, it is not bad that there's medical personnel. God bless them. We need them. We need fire and EMS, fire rescue, whether they're combined, whether they're separate. We desperately need them as law enforcement officers as a part of the overall solution to dealing with problems in our community. But they are distinct. Unless you work in an area where you are public safety and have you have the responsibilities of all of those, well then you have the responsibility of all those, and that's what you chose to do. However, most communities have chosen to have a separate fire rescue or fire department and EMS separately for this very reason. Now, I don't know what their solution would be. Perhaps they should have patrol vehicles driving around with Narcan on a belt or something, and they respond to overdose calls and administer Narcan at their discretion as they're training as medical personnel. I don't want to speak for what their solution would be. Maybe they need to hire more of them to help deal with the opioid epidemic. Maybe they need to hire more staffing there in order to deal with it. But that is their training. That is their area of specialty. That is their area of focus, as opposed to law enforcement, which has its focus built into the name. Really, at the heart of this is, where does it end? If we're gonna say cops should administer Narcan, they should be the ones we depend on to do this. Where do we stop that? Don't drowning victims matter? Why then wouldn't we hire enough officers to have them at every pool in our community? Don't roofers' lives matter? Why don't we have police officers at every construction site to be there ready to administer first aid if someone is falling or injured? I know those sound like extremes, but it goes to prove the point of, where does it end? How many more responsibilities do you want law enforcement officers to have? Which brings me to number 4. Often, what is good can easily get in the way of what is best. Yes, cops often step up in rescue situations, but it's almost always ancillary to the fact that they were doing their job as law enforcement officers. Traffic enforcement and traffic crashes and the reporting of those and the investigation of those is part of the job, so that if there's injuries there, immediate treatment may be possible. This is where maybe there is a gray area with narcotics and having Narcan on hand as an emergency if it's ancillary to what you're already doing. But dispatching police officers to overdoses simply to be the first ones there to administer Narcan, that is where I'm describing the problem that I have. Because if I stop somebody with heroin and I accidentally touch it, I want to be able to have this here. If I accidentally inhaled fentanyl, I want to be able to have a resource for myself, for my partners, and for other innocent people around to be able to have a solution. So I'm okay with Narcan ancillary to it, but to put the onus on law enforcement to be dispatched to this, that is where what is good is getting in the way of what is best. As I mentioned earlier, cops do have a finite amount of time and resources for current and ongoing training. And even when you're on the job, we are already doing surrogate parenting, marriage counseling, landlord-tenant management, dispute management. So there's a lot that goes into this job, and adding more to it might not be the best approach to solve this problem. I want us to be careful to not let something that is has good ideals get in the way of what is the best possible outcomes. All right, that's my quick take on this. I'm sure people are going to put words in my mouth, and I am sure to point that out in the comments. See you out there. Subscribe, like, share, hit the notification button. Oh, all that good stuff. See you guys.